Hey folks, welcome in. With rotation just around the corner, it's a bit of an awkward time to build your first deck or pivot over to a new one. So I wanted to take a look at my 5 favorite beginner budget friendly decks that are also rotation proof. So if you've been kind of spinning around seeing if you should wait 2 months before building a deck, fear not, this is going to be a great entry point where you can pick something up that's going to be playable today and playable after rotation. So stay tuned for a great video. Let's start with our first deck. My name's Jared, and I'll be your gameplay nurse today. Getting into it, let's take a look at the big bridge himself, Archaludon. Important to note that these decks are in no particular order. None of them, I think, are better or stronger than the others. You would be awesome with either one, so just focus on what kind of gameplay archetype really speaks with you and go for that. So with Archaludon, he's got his ability Assemble Alloy. When you evolve into him, you get to take 2 metal energy out of your discard pile and then attach it to your metal Pokemon in any way you want. So he's a very self-sufficient, very tanky stage 1 attacker with a pretty strong attack too. Metal Defender for 3 metal energy does 220. So that one hits a lot of support EX Pokemon like Pheasantipity, Squawkabilly, that sort of thing. So because of that, we have lots of bosses orders in this deck. We run a 4 line of them so that we can look to boss up those 2 prize Pokemon that we can kill in 1 hit, or a 1 prizer that's going to be really detrimental to our opponent. Our draw engine revolves around Professor's Research, and then also Revavroom, where if we can discard an energy card from our hand, we can draw back up to 6 cards. So that's going to be a good way to get some of that energy into the discard pile for Assemble Alloy, as well as a way to just see some more cards and kind of rip through our deck a little bit faster. We've got 4 Night Stretchers as well as a Pal Pad, so don't be too scared to research your hand away, even if there's some cards in there that you really want, because you'll have opportunities to get them back later. Relicanth is also here for its ability Memory Dive, which lets us use a basic, like an attack from a previous evolution. In this case, we're looking at Raging Hammer, which says that this attack does 10 more damage for each damage counter on this Pokemon, which for Duraludon's not that impressive because max it could do would be like plus 40 without any tools attached. But for Archaludon, with his big 300 health bar, he can stack up quite a few damage counters and actually swing pretty hard with that Raging Hammer. He can hit upwards of 370 damage, so that's not something to sneeze at. And then the other kind of concept that you're looking to play around with this deck is Prize Denial. So what that means is your Archaludon does have 300 health. That's going to be kind of difficult for some decks like, say, Dragapult to hit, which it's only swinging for 200. So what you're going to be doing is if you have 200 damage from a Dragapult hit on this Archaludon, you're going to be looking to deny that prize from your opponent by using Professor's Turo to pick the Archaludon back up, which then removes all of the damage counters. Also true with our A-Spec Scoop Up Cyclone, which will pick up not only the Pokemon, but also the energy attached. So that's kind of where the strategy for this deck comes in, and the way you're going to kind of outmaneuver your opponents. Now let's take a look at Gholdengo EX, the Golden String Cheese Man. He's here and he's ready to kick some butt. His main attack, Make It Rain. Discard any basic energy cards from your hand and do 50 more damage for each one that you do. So in order to get a bunch of energy into our hand, for our first one we've got Energy Search Pro, which lets us take 1 of each type of energy out of our deck and into our hand. That's why we have this rainbow of energy here, so that we can get as many as possible into our hand. Take a big swing with Make It Rain. All of that goes into our discard pile, which then will be using Superior Energy. Discard 2 cards and then draw 4 energy back from our discard pile for another big Make It Rain attack. Our draw engine for this deck, we've got Pheasantipity, as most decks do, and then we've also got a 3/3 line of Dunsparce, where Dunsparce has an ability Runaway Draw. We draw 3 cards and then we shuffle Dunsparce and Dunsparce back into our deck, which lets us set that attack or that ability back up once again. We've also got a copy of TM Evo, so we can load up some Gimmighouls, maybe even a Dunsparce, and then evolve right away without relying too heavily on items in case we're getting locked by Badoo. We've also got Cypher Maniac's Code Breaking, which is an interesting one. We search our deck for 2 cards, shuffle our deck, and then put those 2 cards back on the top of our deck, and we're pairing that with Gholdengo's ability Coin Bonus, which once during our turn we can draw a card. If this Pokemon is in the active spot, we draw another card. So we pick out the 2 cards that we want with Cypher Maniacs, and then we draw them with Gholdengo. So it's basically a double Pidgeot quick search. It's very, very powerful. We've got Monkey Dory for playing around the Dragapult matchup, as well as Gardevoir potentially. And other than that, it's a pretty straightforward deck. You're just ripping energy out of your deck or your discard, and then you're throwing it right back in using strong Make It Rain attacks. Very great at taking out things like Dragapult that have those high health numbers that are kind of hoping to not be one-shot. So it is a great deck, easy to pilot, wonderful to pick up, super fun to play. All right, next up, this might look a little different than the Raging Bolt you're used to seeing, but because this is one that is designed for a post-rotation world, so there is a little bit of change going on. One, because we're losing a few cards like Trekking Shoes, and 2, because Badoo is so prevalent, we kind of want to become a little less item reliant in order to get our reliable setups going. So, in lieu of both of those facts, we have a 3/3 Hoot Hoot Knocked Owl line for Knocked Owl's ability Jewel Seeker. If we evolve this Pokemon from our hand during our turn with a Terra Pokemon, which is our Teal Mask, in play already, then we get to pick any 2 trainer cards that we want out of our deck. So trainer is that ability, that wordage up in the top right. So it's any supporter, any item, any, well, we don't run a tool here, or any stadium. We get to choose 2, whichever 2 we want. So if we're being item locked by Badoo and we haven't been able to Earthen Vessel and then discard some energy in order to use a Professor Sada, we have a Crispin instead, where we can quickly accelerate some energy to one of our Raging Bolts, or maybe even a Fan Rotom to just get that Badoo out of the way and then continue to set up afterwards. So it gets us kind of out of that early game lock. We also have a few different support Pokemon that you're not used to seeing. We got Mew back in the deck. We got Latios. We even have a Ditto. But the major attacking points of this deck, what you're looking to do is you're using Bellowing Thunder, which lets you do 70 more damage for each energy that you discard off of your attached Pokemon. So you're loading up your active and your bench with energy by utilizing things like the Teal Dance ability, which once per turn you can attach a grass energy to this card and then draw a card afterwards, and that does not count as your attach per turn. So you're loading up your Teal Mask with energy, you're loading up your Raging Bolts with energy using Sada or Crispin, and then you're ripping off the amount that you need in order to do enough damage to take out your opponent's active Pokemon. So that's basically the gameplay loop. Very similar to Gholdengo, but instead of the energy coming from your hand, it's coming from being attached to the Pokemon that you have in play. If you're enjoying this video so far, please make sure to subscribe. I do a lot of beginner-friendly guides and walkthroughs, so for some of these decks that we've covered, a guide already exists on my channel. For some of the others, there's going to be one coming very soon. So make sure to subscribe so you don't miss out. If you have any questions or want any clarification, please leave a comment down below. I'm very active in the comment section. I love answering y'all's questions, so please don't hesitate to reach out. Next deck is Ceruledge EX. Now, I think Ceruledge EX is a fantastic attacker, but I do believe that they will always need to be paired with another attacker in deck. So pre-rotation, currently they're being paired very successfully with Palkia V-Star and Radiant Greninja. Both make for excellent backup attackers. Radiant Greninja is great at sniping out 2 low health basic Pokemons using its Moonlight Shuriken to do 90 damage to 2 different guys. And then Palkia V-Star is a fantastic early game attacker when you just don't quite have enough energy into the discard to get Ceruledge hitting those big numbers right away. So moving forward, I think that the attacker that Ceruledge is partnered with is going to kind of depend on what decks you are running into more frequently. So say that big 2-stage Pokemon are kind of favored in the meta, like Dragapult or Charizard. I think that Gholdengo Ceruledge is going to be very, very strong, is Gholdengo can hit those early game numbers, right? It can get big 350 damage attacks by getting 6 energy into hand and then swinging super hard right away, whereas that would take Ceruledge a little bit longer to hit those numbers. And then at the end of the game, after you've kind of exhausted your Gholdengo line, you've got a lot of your energy into the discard pile, then Ceruledge can come up and clean up with those big damage numbers that we're used to seeing from them. On the other side of the coin, if we are running into a lot more decks with Pokemon that have lower HP levels, especially like 120 or under, or that are weak to lightning, we could pair Ceruledge with an attacker like Iron Hands, and we could run a bit of a faux kind of Miraidon setup where we've got a ton of electric energy in the deck, and then we're using electric generators to power up our Iron Hands in order to take 2 prize knockouts off of 1 prize Pokemon by using the attack Ampu very much. And to kind of help those electric generators succeed, we've got Academy at night so that we can take an electric energy out of our hand, put it back on top of our deck, hit an electric generator, be guaranteed at least 1 free attach that turn. Stuff like that could become a really interesting way to start to pivot with Ceruledge EX and kind of keep them a relevant deck in going forward with the meta. I think that if you're trying to run a pure Ceruledge only deck, you will have success against certain matchups, but it is going to limit your pairings quite a bit. I think that if you are open-minded and stay flexible with Ceruledge EX and look for different attackers to pair into this deck, you're really going to start to see a much better match spread for yourself, and you're going to see a lot of fun and interesting combinations. I think there's even a deck going around right now that is pairing Dragapult with Ceruledge, and that is like kind of fun and interesting to play too. So if you're someone out there that you enjoy kind of like a lot of deck building and you're kind of looking into getting to like a more of a rogue type of setup, but also staying a bit safer and within like able to compete within the current meta, I think Ceruledge is something that you're really going to want to pay attention to, because there are a ton of different options that this deck can run and you can have a lot of fun doing that. And then last but definitely not least, we have a recurring favorite on this channel, our big boy himself, Charizard EX, and what I think is going to be a very Badoo-proof and beginner-friendly way to play Charizard moving forward into post-rotation and beyond. So this deck also uses the Dudunsparce engine to use that runaway draw attack to draw 3 cards and then shuffle the Dudunsparce back into your deck. And that pairs very well with Enriching Energy, which when you attach this to a Pokemon, you immediately draw 4 cards. So you can attach this to your Dudunsparce, draw 4, and then use runaway draw to draw 3. And now both the Dudunsparce and the Enriching Energy get shuffled back into your deck, and you could even use that out as a way to draw 7 more cards again in the same game. So very powerful. We are still looking at using the rare candy to get Charizard set up early, but if we are being locked by Badoo, that's not a big deal. We can just kind of slow roll out some Charmeleons, and then same thing is true. We have a much thicker Duskull, Dusclops, Dusknoir line in 3-2-2, so that if we need to slow roll those out as well, it's not going to kill us. We also have Drayton as one of our supporters, which is kind of a less used one lately, but it actually really comes in handy when you're being item locked early game. You look at the top 7 cards of your deck, and then you pick out a Pokemon and a trainer that you find there and shuffle them into your hand. So it's a great way to get out like those evolution Pokemon or something else that you need as you're kind of going through. We also have Jacques as a way to get 2 evolution Pokemon out of our deck. Is a fantastic way to keep progressing while under item lock. And then we also have 4 copies of Iono to really disrupt our opponent late game. Remember that Charizard EX has always been a deck that likes to play from behind. And I think that's kind of gotten forgotten a bit, especially with the new edition of Badoo of like, oh man, I couldn't get my setup going turn 1, like Charizard's busted, I can't play this deck anymore. Like, no, we were always playing from behind. Like that's always been our goal. So we're looking to kind of fall behind early in the prize race. That's okay. We have counter catchers that we can then have access to. Our Burning Darkness becomes more powerful the more prize cards that our opponents take. So that's also why we're popping Dusk Noirs, to give our opponents more prize cards so that we can fall behind, so that we can hit harder, so we can use our counter catchers. And that's part of what this deck has always been really strong at. And now in addition to that, we have 4 copies of Iono to really disrupt our opponent's hands in the late game, where we can get them into an unplayable position and then just sweep them with Charizard and Burning Darkness. So this is a really fun way to play this deck. You get to see a lot of cards. You're always like have a giant hand size. Like it's pretty cool how many options you get access to using the Dunsparce Enriching Energy draw engine. As far as how to buy singles and start building these decks in person, for Charizard, you know, they have the League Battle deck, which will get you a lot of the way there, and then you can kind of fill in with singles. A lot of these other decks, though, you're just going to kind of be building from scratch. There's not like a pre-built or an easy way to buy them. So I kind of wanted to go over what that can look like with online shopping. I am not sponsored by any of these stores. I have no affiliations, nothing like that, but kind of the most commonly used online shopping is tcgplayer.com, where you can just search for any card that you want. Say you're trying to build a Gholdengo deck, and then you can just figure out who you want to buy from. Take a look at the shops on the left hand side over here. It will tell you how many sales they've made, what their rating is. You know, there's a lot of variation in sellers on tcgplayer.com. You're buying from either individuals or from stores that have an online marketplace. So make sure that you're paying attention to that. They're not all coming from the same source. And then you just kind of load up your cart. And then it usually takes about 10 to 14 days for the cards to get to you. So if you're looking to play something this weekend, not the best source, but if you have a bit of leeway and you can be patient with it, this is actually a very cheap way to pick up the singles that you need. And even if you're going through and you're sourcing like an entire deck, you can usually get away with building a complete 60 for under $50. It's pretty budget friendly. Pokemon in general is one of the more budget friendly TCGs to jump into. So very, very thankful for that. Otherwise, you can go to your local card store. I know a lot of places have been struggling to get singles lately, but it's definitely worth checking out. And then going to your local competitions, making friends with people. A lot of us have way too much bulk. We have, you know, 3 Gholdengo EXs that we don't really need, and just kind of like looking around, making trades with people, asking like, hey, like I just need like 2 more earthen vessels. Like, can you hook me up for tonight? You know, that just being friendly, being open, sharing with people. That's a great way to develop relationships. And it's what this card game's all about when it comes down to it. So don't be afraid to just ask and kind of make those connections with people too. So that would be my top 3 recommendations for getting these decks built for yourself.